This is Michael Cross here with Unlock the Door Radio. Tonight, I wanted our audience to be able to hear your work when it comes to art. And, well, what I'd like to do is start off with your work, the One Nation Under God. That's what caught my attention originally. It was when I first saw your work.
Yeah.
Just tell me about who you are and what got you started and what your motivations are in these excellent political paintings that you do.
Thanks, Mike. Well, I've been an artist my whole life. Most of my professional career was doing landscape paintings. But about, it was in 2008. So, my goodness, that's been that long. 7 years ago, I got an inspiration to do the One Nation Under God painting, and that was the first time that I had ever done anything that was kind of in a political, patriotic sphere. And it was during the election, and I had found out that John McCain was going to be the nominee for the Republican Party. And I came back to my studio. I was totally depressed because of what I knew about McCain. And, I remember going in there and I was by myself, and I'm a religious artist too. I have that political / religious side to me, and anyway, I was in my studio and I felt like saying a prayer, and I was like, God, what am I supposed to do? I mean, I'm just an artist. This is so depressing. And I looked up at my easel, and I had kind of like a vision of this painting that I wanted to do, and it was very vivid. I sketched out what I saw in my mind, and I used that to kind of guide me as I did this enormous painting. It was probably about 7 feet wide, and that was the first time I did anything like this. And honestly, I didn't know what would come of it, because it was so different than anything I'd done before, and my business partner at the time didn't want me to do it. He didn't think we'd sell any of them, so I did it not thinking that I would sell a single print or anything. I just wanted to paint it. And to this day, it's been probably one of my most successful images.
Well, I would encourage listeners to just while we're doing the interview here, just look up on Google One Nation Under God, John McNaughton, and take a look at this. I mean, the detail and the symbolism here. I mean, you've got Jesus holding the Bill of Rights. Am I correct?
The Constitution. Yeah.
Okay. And you've got some people looking towards him, it looks like, for inspiration, others somewhat in despair, others ignoring him. So I assume that's a symbolism, meaning ignoring both God or Jesus and also the Founding Fathers' words.
Yeah, the painting's pretty loaded. It's got tons of imagery and symbolism, and and I did it that way because I feel like that's a good way to get a message across, because people start asking questions. What does this mean? What does that mean? And sometimes the message that the painting conveys has been confusing to people. I've had professors write papers and have their students write papers about the painting. Cambridge even had a class where they spent a big time trying to explain what the painting was about. And most of the time they get it wrong. Because, the painting was not meant to say that we should be a theocracy, or that we should be, that everybody in the country needs to follow Jesus, even though that would be nice. The purpose of the painting was simply to say that I believe the Constitution was divinely inspired. And that's why I have him holding the Constitution. And behind him are all these different patriots from the past, going back to the Founding Fathers, to different soldiers who've died in war, modern presidents who've already passed away. And they're speaking from the dust to the living Americans, and they're asking them to remember the sacrifices that they've done for our country and for what our Constitution stands for. And then you have in the front of the painting, you have on one side, you have what I consider your strong Americans, those who believe in the ideals of liberty and the Constitution. And then on the other side, you have those that are, I would consider, more confused. And they're kind of turning away and ignoring all the other people in the painting. They have their own agendas, their own things. And, each one of those people are symbolic of a different kind of American. For example, you have on one side, with the strong Americans, you have a Marine, a mother, a farmer, different types of people. There's actually, the mother is leading up a child who's walking up the steps to touch the Constitution, representing the rising generation. And then on the other side, you have a federal court judge, a Supreme Court judge actually, who has his hands in his face because he's feeling remorse for some of the things that they've done to weaken our country. You have a politician with his with a cell phone up to his head, who's not paying attention to what's going on. Even the way Christ is dressed in the painting is very symbolic. There's some imagery on his clothing that has meaning too. So the painting is just loaded with all kinds of images. I mean, I could spend the entire time right now with you just going through that, but we have so many different paintings we could talk about. I mean, there's just, it's a lot of effort and thought goes into these paintings to help people to learn more about, what's important to me as the artist.
Yeah, I think you've done a really fantastic job there. I mean, I'm somewhat of a fan of Carl Jung and how archetypes can cross between cultures and generations to communicate a message. And I think one problem in the past has been liberal. No, they'll all say left. There may be people in Europe and liberal conservative kind of mixed up there. But people from the left they seem to have kind of a monopoly over creativity when it comes to using archetypes and art and satire. Whereas the right tries to deal more with facts and figures and cases. I think that art is a tool that can really communicate to people, though, on an emotional level.
It can, and that's exactly what I try to do. Is I try to use the paintings as a way to communicate my ideas. And I remember, going through art school back in the early 80s, and even then, you had seen a big shift. The art world really changed about the time that we were seeing the Cultural Revolution in America, in the 60s. And, we went from, really looking at paintings that were recognizable and that had a message to paintings that were a lot more contemporary and abstract. And not that I have a problem with that. It's just a completely different language. And so when as an artist, I had to deal with the left, even in art school, because if you even painted anything that resembled something, they would, hang you up to dry. Mm-hmm. And so I came to a point where I decided, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm just going to paint what I feel is important and just let people decide for themselves. And, it's funny, when I painted a lot of these images, the left is just infuriated that an artist would really paint these things. One of the most remarkable experiences was when I painted this simple painting of Obama burning the Constitution. It's called One Nation Under Socialism. Mm-hmm. And it's just a very simple painting. I just have Obama standing, and he's holding up the Constitution and pointing at it, and it's going up in flames. And on the surface, it seems very simple and very obvious, but that picture has symbols in it as well. And when I painted it, it went viral immediately. I mean, I just put it on Facebook, and next thing I knew, it was on Drudge Report, and it was everywhere, And Sean Hannity actually called me up and interviewed me about the painting, and he ended up buying the original. And that drove people insane that on the left that picture was out there. And the New York Times, the LA Times, the New York Post, I mean, there were newspapers all over the country, even in England and other countries, that were talking about this phenomenon, that this painting had got all this attention. And I remember the New York Times actually invited art critics from London and New York to talk about the painting, And Sean Hannity threatened to go to the Metropolitan Museum and demand that they hang the painting, considering the other stuff that they have there. And I don't know if he ever tried. He was telling me he was going to do that. But the critics basically blasted the painting for reasons that were so ridiculous that I just had to laugh. I mean, what the art world considers art is totally different than how I would define art. I mean, I look at a painting and I judge it based on the power of the message, the way it can communicate feelings and thoughts, and for me, it's all about the communication. And boy, I tell you, doing that simple little painting was like throwing a big boulder in the pond and watching the ripples. It was remarkable.
Well, the interesting thing is that I haven't had that much art, but I mean, I write. I do. I've got a few novels published in the Freedom from Conscience series, so yeah. I like to hang around people who, I know artists and I know musicians and stuff like that. The one thing that everyone seems to agree on in the, I'll call it the creative world. I mean, although there's other areas where people are creative too. The one thing they seem to agree on.
I couldn't hear the last part of what you said.
Oh, that basically that, if you're dealing with art, I like to call it like the creative world. And the one thing that seems to be something that everyone agrees on is that if it provokes thought, it's art. And you provoked thought, it looks like really big time.
Well, the advantage of a painting is it can provoke thoughts or feelings that are hard to get from other mediums as much. And you can't ignore a painting. When I come out with one of these pictures, I could have written the same thing and it probably would have got lost in the blogosphere, but I do a painting and, it communicates on so many levels. And I've learned, and this is one of the beauties of living in the modern world, is I can take this painting and I can write about it. I can do a video about it. I can do an interactive web page, which I've done on most of these paintings. And I use all these different medias to help with the message. And it gets spread to millions of people. I have one video that's had over 5 million views already, and another one that's close to that. And the Drudge Report picks them up. I mean, everybody sees this and they think about it. I mean, that's the power of the media that we have today. And as a simple artist, I mean, I'm like a little one-man band who just sits in my studio and I just do my own thing, but I'm able to communicate to millions of people how I feel. And, I mean, even among conservatives, not everybody agrees with me, but it gets people thinking, gets them talking, and that's really the purpose behind what I'm trying to do.
One thing I really like about your painting there, for those who didn't catch it before, One Nation Under Socialism. Again, people can go to the official website. If you're listening to this, it's johnmcnaughton.com. If you're listening to this on YouTube, I'll have a link to your page. But the one thing that strikes me is in that painting, aside from just the Constitution burning, you also present Obama in a very formal, respectable suit. And I think many times people have an image that people that want to do away with certain protections and civil liberties and so forth are these crazed. They're either these dictators, like someone in North Korea with some sort of communist uniform, or there's some crazed radicals, that dress like they just stepped out of Woodstock. And those people are not the danger to people's civil liberties nowadays. The people that are the real danger, it seems, are the ones who dress in the expensive Armani suits and have the styled hair and so forth.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, when I put that painting together, I just wanted to kind of show the seriousness of what's at stake and do it in a really dramatic way. And it's kind of like an icon type of painting, that people would think of. So when I put this picture together, I wanted him to look very sinister, very kind of like he knows what he's doing. This is not some joke or something that's just happening arbitrarily. And I put some messages in that painting that are very subtle. For example, the bottom of the Constitution where it's burning, you see the embers falling as the flames go up. The shape of it is the southern border of the United States. You can see, Texas, all of that. And if you look at what's happening with illegal immigration and how our borders are being overrun, it could literally be the downfall of our country, and it's going up in flames. And
one thing go ahead.
I was going to say, when this painting came out, the border wasn't even an issue at the time, but I kind of felt like it was going to be, and I mentioned that to Sean Hannity when he bought it. But that's just one of the symbols in the painting.
Well, on that particular issue, I do think it's fascinating. My wife's not American, and we've run off the forums before whenever we've toyed with the idea of moving back to the United States. And the forms to get a green card, visa, all that kind of stuff. I mean, these are very complicated procedures if you do it legally. Okay? Yeah. If you enter legally, it's extremely complicated. And the thing is that whether a person believes in immigration or not, or what level they agree with it or not, it seems to me it's unfair if someone's coming in from Europe or China or, wherever, and they want to become, a part of the American society, that they have to go through a nightmare and interviews and things like this to do it. But yet, you kind of think that, well, why not just fly into down south and then just walk across the border? I mean, it's sad. It's
ridiculously unfair. And I mean, on one hand, you have those that have been trying for years, and then on the other hand, you have those that just have to walk across the border, and they have, and they're talking about giving them amnesty in the near future. I don't blame the Mexicans and those from down south that want to have a better life. Sometimes people take out their frustrations on them. Honestly, I'm frustrated with the politicians that are using this as a way to help their campaigns to try to garnish donations from different special interest groups. I mean, it goes both parties. Whether it's Republican and Democrat, they're both to blame, and it's treasonous in my mind. And it's also not safe for those people who come here. Everything about that issue just infuriates me, and I wish that eventually it's gonna come to a boiling head, and they're gonna have to do something about it.
Yeah. Well, even countries within the EU that have a very liberal policy towards accepting people from other countries, there is still a process that has to be gone through, and it's very strict, the process that someone has to go through. So it's not really, to me, I'm not talking about this as even an immigration issue, because I don't even really see it as an immigration issue, because I see it as you have to have a policy that fits everybody fairly.
Right. Agreed. Yeah.
So if you're,
and they need to expedite the process. It shouldn't be so lengthy and cumbersome. I mean, if you have somebody that has something they can offer to America, that something that would benefit our country, I mean, get them in fast.
Well, it's also
if they've got diseases and ties to Al Qaeda. You know, they're not coming in for nothing. I mean, we let people come back into our country that have fought for ISIS, and we don't even worry about their passports. I mean, I don't understand why there's so much nutty stuff going on in our country, other than it's just, you know, special interest groups in Washington and the corruption that exists there.
Well, I just think, you know, you mentioned the thing about I'm just going to deal a little tiny bit with that. To me, it's really sad that if someone, for instance, deals with these issues, and I've seen this on internet discussions and so forth, if you'll even mention something about maybe the U.S. being somewhat responsible for funding groups like ISIS, like a year ago when it was just like, you know, basically the question was, are you trying to overthrow the Syrian government? And they're like, yeah. Are you for democracy? And they're going, yeah. And, you know, you just give them what they want, not realizing that maybe some of them were legitimate, but others were just, they had another agenda. And if you say that to people, many of them just like, oh, you're just being conspiracy oriented. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I could show you articles from very prestigious, even left-wing-ish globalist organizations saying that this was going on. And they'll still say, well, no, I didn't hear that on the news. And like, what? You're never going to hear anything on the news. It's 30-second soundbite stories.
Exactly. It's very frustrating. You know, people assume sometimes that because I've gone after Obama with my paintings aggressively, that I must be some kind of a GOP Republican, you know, front runner, whatever, you know, somebody trying to work with the establishment. And the fact is, I'm very much a libertarian and very upset with what the Republicans are doing. Although that's the party that I feel like I have to work with to try to, you know, establish some kind of change with. And, you know, I see a lot of conservatives that are very mixed on foreign policy, especially when it comes to, you know, things like war and so forth. And so, you know, even those who follow me and like my work sometimes have very different opinions.
Well, I just think that it was kind of, you know, you know, for those listening, this shows, you know, a week and a half after the elections. And, you know, I think a lot of conservative people were happy with the outcome until they heard that John McCain is now the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee or something like that. I mean, that's kind of like that deflates things. I mean, you could look at every hotspot in the world where it seemed like the flames of war were being, you know, stoked or whatever, you know, ignited. And you saw, I mean, John McCain went into Syria. By the way, he did not, a lot of people don't realize, he went into Syria without proper, proper visa issued by the Syrian government. Therefore, he was an illegal alien when he was in Syria. But then Ukraine and, you know, these kind of places, I mean, that's scary. If he's coming to your neighborhood and you're in another country, watch out.
I'm not a big fan of John McCain at all. And I'm really irritated at what our government does overseas in these, you know, special op projects where they go in and they train these people and you know, teach them how to overthrow governments. And then next thing you know, they're fighting against us in ISIS and in Libya. And you know, I see so much corruption on so many levels. I don't know what to believe anymore when I listen to the news. You know, I mean, the American people are strong. We're patriotic. We do the right thing. But our government does so many things that we don't see that are behind our backs that I'm just very concerned, as a lot of people are right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing that I think people learn real fast about media is and this is a good technique to use with taking your kids or your grandkids to an event where the media is going to be covering it. And then have them watch what it is actually broadcast on the media itself later that night. And most of the time you get a totally different story. I mean, absolute different story. It must be driving the mainstream media crazy.
That's a good idea. I ought to try that sometime. But I don't get a lot of big things happening around where I live too often. So, but that would be a good experiment.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that they must be having a fit. The fact that, everyone in the audience now can have a cell phone and they can be recording what's going on, and some of them will put it on YouTube.
Oh yeah,
it must be driving the media crazy.
All that election fraud, when people are seeing their votes changing right in front of them,
and
they're videotaping that. I mean, you couldn't do that 15 years ago. It's amazing. But even though we're catching a lot of this, it seems to get brushed under the rug a lot. This Ebola outbreak and what's happened with that. I mean, a lot of things that have come to the surface that just get brushed under the rug, and you just wonder what's really going on half the time. I'm just beside myself. I'm wondering it right now what paintings I could possibly do that I haven't already done that could make a difference. I mean, things like when I painted that picture Abomination, you mentioned that one before. That was supposed to represent the first term of his presidency. And I couldn't believe how many crazy things happened up until right before the Benghazi event on 9/11, because that's when I did the painting, right before the Benghazi. And I could barely squeeze everything into this crazy painting. But since then, he's done even more. I mean, I could do a second painting, and I don't know if I'd even be able to squeeze everything in it. I've never seen anything like this before.
Well, I just, it's, have any plans on making a painting that involves a few zombies? Because that seems to be catching people's attention. I don't know. It seems to have a lot of symbolism nowadays for what's going on.
Oh, well, I don't know. Sometimes I come close to doing one, and then I'll be like, I don't know. I mean, it's got to really resonate. It's got to be something that a lot of people are thinking, and yet it's got to be a little more than just a political cartoon. Just a quick statement. And so I've got a few ideas for some paintings, and I may do them next year. But as an artist, when it hits you. You can't help yourself but paint it, and I haven't got to that point yet with a new one yet.
Okay.
So when it does, I'll be it'll feel like a landslide to me. I'll just be doing it day and night. So we'll see what happens.
Really good. I just want to throw that thing in there. My daughter has watched a bit of The Walking Dead, and she's the one saying, "Hey, we need to have food storage. We need to be prepared in case things fall apart." And maybe there is something. In the collective unconsciousness.
We chuckle about it, but the honest truth is, everything is on the edge of a knife right now. I mean, our society is so fragile, and we don't even know it. I mean, there's so many scenarios that could push us over the edge, and the American people aren't prepared for most anything. I mean, you saw what happened with Sandy, the Hurricane Sandy and Katrina, and how those communities were just turned upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to wait for the government to come in and help them. Well, what happens if our government is starting to shake and fall apart? I mean, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, we're not in a good condition with our country. And I even read this morning that Russia just equaled our capacity in their nuclear weapons for the first time since the Cold War. They're right back up to where they were. And we've withdrawn from our weapons from NATO, the nuclear weapons we had there, and all these things that used to protect us and our allies to that extent are not what they used to be. And so there's a lot of things to be concerned about.
Mm-hmm. Hey, you mentioned the thing about the symbols in Abomination. Now, again, listeners, please, go to Google and look up Abomination painting. Tell me a little bit about some of the symbols. Some of those I can recognize. I can see what you mean here. Some of them I don't totally understand.
Well, you have Obama at his podium,
Yeah,
and
what's
like
with the
he's
chicken?
preaching.
What's with the chicken?
Well, the rooster is symbolic of Reverend Wright, saying the chickens would come home to roost,
Ah,
and he said, GD America, and all of that. But it's also a symbol that we need to wake up. The rooster's calling.
mm-hmm. Hello? Can you hear me?
But I carefully designed the composition so that the eye just kind of swims around in the painting and comes back to Obama over and over again. It's 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 a crazy painting. I hope your listeners will go take a look at it because there's so much in it, and they'll be able to recognize things like, Gaddafi, and there's a man sitting on the ground holding a sign that says "Need work," and he's got a shovel, because of the shovel-ready jobs that we were
Mm-hmm.
promised, and you got a reference to Fast and Furious with all the guns, the automatic weapons thrown on the ground, and Fort Hood. I mean, it's got an Obamacare symbol in there with the gurney and the dead body on it, with the toe tag that says Obamacare.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just loaded with stuff. So,
What's with the cop? I'm trying to figure out what he's up to there.
well, in the early days of Obama's presidency, there was that professor that was arrested, I think, in Massachusetts,
Ah, yeah.
and Obama said the cop acted stupidly. This was before they even knew the full story. And so he invited his friend, the professor, and this cop after the fact, after a lot of people had criticized Obama, to a beer summit at the White House. And so you've got this cop kind of sitting on the floor with his beer, leaning up against the resolute desk of the White House, looking at his glass, wondering what just happened. It was a very kind of in my mind, it was very unpresidential to pass judgment, and all he was doing was stoking the fires of this racial conflict
Mm-hmm.
that's happening in the country. And after that happened, of course, there was the issue with Trayvon Martin, and he stuck his nose in that and created a problem where he could have brought the country together. Instead, he divided it more by making all those comments about that. Trayvon could have been my son, and things like that. It seems that almost at every turn, at every curve, Obama makes the wrong decision. Every single time. He does the exact opposite of what somebody with half a brain tied behind their back, like Limbaugh would say. and I just have to scratch my head. What's he doing?
Well, the thing that strikes me is I see a lot of conservative or libertarian commenters talk about how inept Obama is, and I tend to think exactly opposite. I think he's kind of like, if you go back to the Roman days, Claudius, who faked being, inept and retarded even, and that's what kept him alive long enough to be able to assume the throne and then actually act in a decisive manner. And I heard, too, that George Bush, he took language lessons so he could have that kind of Texan accent.
Really? Never heard that one.
That's I've actually read that, too. And, well, it makes sense. I mean, he's from the East Coast, and you would lose that accent really quick. Regardless of whether he did or not, I mean, Bush was not like a man of the people like Ronald Reagan could actually say, well, I grew up poor and worked my way up. Bush was born into it. So regardless of whether he fakes the accent or not, he didn't seem genuine when he was out there.
I have to think about that conspiracy theory. That's a good one. It could be true. I mean, what's funny is some of these conspiracy theories we use.
Yeah? I didn't catch that last sentence.
He's either the most inept president we've ever had, or he is doing exactly what he means to do. And I have to think for in many cases he's doing exactly what he's trying to do and or get away with
Hmm.
because he wanted to fundamentally change America. I mean, he said that from the first day, and look what he's done. I mean, we are moving. We're on the bus headed over the cliff.
Yeah, he
So
has done a great deal, and it's the thing is that I think there's a lot of people on the left that are waking up. I mean, you
yeah,
see them questioning, even some. I mean, like what was it about a year and a half ago? Director Oliver Stone said something
yeah,
about,
Michael Moore.
yeah, well, yeah, but I have a little bit more respect for Stone, but
Yeah,
but Stone did say that Obama was a snake that had to be
kind of
stopped.
breaking up on me.
Huh? Oh, am I coming in now? Is it coming in now?
Yeah, it's still
Okay.
kind of choppy. Okay,
Okay. That's the perils of Skype.
well,
It's a great technology, but it's problematic.
you're half a world away. Yep.
Yeah, exactly a half a world. But the thing is though that issues like Edward Snowden,
Yeah.
issues that bring to the forefront some cherished, at least the left would say, some cherished beliefs that we need to have a transparent society, and that seems to have gone out the window. I mean,
Yeah.
we have the very powerful, like, Democratic senators and Congress people who are like, oh no, NSA's on. We like NSA now. It's
Well, it just
great.
shows to show you how much we've been lied to,
Mhm.
about things like that, about the NSA, and it makes you wonder, what else are they lying to us about, and how much are they tracking people and keeping information they can use, against us? And I mean, it sounds like a gigantic conspiracy theory, but it's been proven to be true,
Yeah,
and
I
so it
remember
just
about 2 years ago, you could find lots of articles, but they were alternative press talking about the fact that you can be tracked, all the phone calls are saved, all of this kind of stuff. NSA knows where you've been on the web and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, huh?
And they would deny it. They would say, no, that's not the case. Then Edward Snowden came out and everything broke loose. And they had but, 2 years ago, you were called a conspiracy nut if you said that. And, it was true.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
anyway,
hear
let's
you.
move. Huh?
Sorry, I was clearing my throat. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. The abomination one, that I haven't seen that as much on the net, but I also like you got George Soros in there and clutching a
Right.
briefcase. I can only imagine what's in the briefcase, and looking
Yeah.
towards Obama like he's his son.
Yep.
Really proud of him there. And most people have no clue who even George Soros is or any of these other kind of individuals. So anyway, we'll move on to this other painting here, and that's the Wake Up America.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one. I had the idea of having Obama kind of in a political rally type of environment, with the banners and the lights on him. He's standing up there and he's got his hands out like, I'm going to take care of you guys. And then you have money falling out of nowhere, out of the sky. It's
Mm,
like rain, and it's landing, and people are grabbing it out of the air and they're scooping it up off the ground. And then if you look closely, you notice that all the people are wrapped in heavy chains and with locks, and they seem to not even realize that there's these chains on them. And as you look through the painting, you notice on the far end there's some people trying to get out of the chains. You have a guy with a hacksaw trying to cut the chain.
mm,
He happens to be the same person that was in the Forgotten Man painting, which is also a well-known painting I did of the man on the bench with Obama standing on the Constitution. But you have that same guy trying to cut the chains. The painting's got lots of interesting details in it. There's people holding, kind of picketing with signs. You can read some of the signs that are behind them, and there's famous world leaders that are applauding, that are standing behind Obama, including Putin and some of the other famous people. But that painting, really the purpose of it is to explain what's happening with our national debt and how it's destroying our country, and so I wanted to make a point with you doing that picture.
Well, the interesting thing is, and I know that economics is not one of those things that catches people's attention. When you get a politician caught with his pants down, then that catches people's attention real fast. But when you deal with economic issues, people kind of turn off, unfortunately. Can you hear me there?
Yeah, you're kind of breaking up, but I'm sort of following you.
Okay. Well, the thing is, though, that very few people really get into economic issues. That's not what they pick up the newspaper, for those that still read newspapers, are looking for.
Right.
But, your symbol there of like the Saudi Arabian guy, that easily can refer to, if people can look up things about the petrodollar and, and how the dollar is kept up with the fact that it's a reserve currency. Then you got the Chinese, they're financing our debt. And irony is they're paying for many of the things that, we build state, military bases out in the Pacific, and kind of the Chinese are inadvertently funding them because they're loaning us the money to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, if people actually realize, they don't even have to go into the Federal Reserve, just the fact that but that's an interesting subject, but just how much money we owe the Chinese and the Saudi Arabians. We owe money to Russia even.
Yeah, that's why they're all in the painting, standing in the background. Mm-hmm. They're applauding. They don't mind that our country is headed down a dark path because, they're going to enrich themselves along the way. Eventually, I'm sure Russia and China and a lot of these other countries would like to see us step down as the world currency, which, you referred to the petrodollar and how that affects all that. It's not a big leap to suggest that, the Iraq war and Afghanistan and Syria and a lot of those are related to us trying to, solidify our position with the petrodollar.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and using these paintings, I try to get people thinking about these things, and they come in at different levels. First somebody will look at the painting and say, "Well, that's interesting. We're wrapped up in chains and getting money. Yeah, there's some problem there." But then, for example, I hid 6 keys in the painting, where if people find the keys on my website, a document pops up and explains one of the keys to help us wake up America, and so, eliminating our oil dependency, entitlement spending, unfair trade, U.S. dollar, all those things, have an impact. But, we're in it pretty heavily over there in the Middle East, and boy, to think of the trillions of dollars that we spend to try to, buoy ourselves up there at the cost of our nation, it really frustrates me.
Yeah, and also too the heavy toll that's taking on the people in that region.
Yes.
You see various figures for how many Syrians have died and how many Libyans were killed during the war. When NATO was bombing them. And of course, NATO, that means America, but, some of their friends. And Iraq for the past 20 years, everyone in Iraq knows someone who has died as a result of the wars or the sanctions. It must be really something that you can sort of understand why groups like ISIS can kind of get a foothold with some people.
Yes, yes, I know what you're saying, and I agree with the morality issue of it. Um, it's hard for me because I support our troops, and the people that join the military with their, rose-colored glasses, and they have these ideals of liberty and patriotism, and then we get sucked into these wars, um, and I just it makes me sick inside, and I did a painting once. You didn't mention this one, but I did a painting once called "Peace is Coming," and in that painting, it has all the different soldiers who've ever lived, and they're gathered around, Christ, and it's based on the scripture in Isaiah that says that they'll turn their swords into plowshares, and that they'll learn of war no more. And then, as Christ is walking through this smoky battlefield and the soldiers are falling down and bowing down to him, you have an American soldier laying down his weapon. And you have people in the painting, both adversaries and allies. People like you have a Nazi soldier and probably a Taliban soldier, and then you have that American soldier. And I'm not one that believes in these wars where we go out and we take first strike positions. For me, war should only be a defensive measure, and it's just something that's troubling to me, and it's a very political subject because I know there's a lot of conservatives that think differently.
Well, neoconservatives. I mean,
there you go.
I mean, we celebrated Veterans Day the other day, and I can't help but think that, I mean, the average soldier on all sides, I mean, in modern conflicts, for the most part, has been a victim. I mean,
exactly.
They've just been thrown out there. Their country had its propaganda, and I mean, you watch these documentaries of World War One, and you sit back going, how in the world did World War One take place? I mean, this is 100 years ago. There's actually some small number, but some people alive today that were alive when this war took place.
Yeah.
And the thing is that it seemed so illogical. But you could see if you watch these documentaries and read up on it, that it was just the people that were making a fortune were the ones making arms and
the war money.
And everything that was involved with fighting the war. They were safe. They were just sitting back in London or later Washington, and they were, just raking in the cash, whereas men were being killed on every side. And then later you had the Spanish flu epidemic that came in as an opportunistic disease for the most part and just wiped out massive numbers of civilian men, women, and children.
Yeah, I mean, I've read some of the history behind that, and there's a lot of history that points to a conspiracy involving that, and I don't know enough about it that I could be an authority, but I do feel that there's definitely a lot involved in these wars and these epidemics that are going on behind the scenes. I've just, over the years, I've got to the point where I just don't believe every single thing that they tell me in the history book or on the History Channel, or, I mean, there's just so much going on. And, fortunately we have the internet, and if we dig a little deeper, we can find things. Not everything's true on the internet, but we live in an amazing time where, people can make a difference politically that normally couldn't. Somebody who's an artist like myself can sit in my little studio and paint a picture that affects millions of people. You can be over in Sweden doing this and reaching out to a lot of people that wouldn't know this information. I mean, this is an amazing time to live, but it's a dangerous time, and we just have to, stay involved and do what we can.
Yeah,
I mean, this is
true.
This is time.
Before the internet, if you'd have done your paintings, you would have had the option of placing them in local galleries
Yeah,
or try to get into a magazine. And now with the internet, you can reach a potential audience everywhere in the world.
that's right. Yeah,
And
it's changed.
yeah, I mean that is so fantastic. And when it comes to, well, I just remember one thing. I don't know if you remember this, but when Ron Paul was in a debate with the other Republican candidates in the 2012 primaries,
Yeah,
they were in this group, and these people had to be really well educated. Okay, these were political activists for the Republican Party.
yeah,
Okay, I've been involved in the Republican Party. These people are smart. Okay, they're not just someone you pulled off the street for like one of those Jay Leno jaywalking episodes. And I remember that when Ron Paul said something about foreign policy, he said, you know, the Iranians might remember 1953 when their government was overthrown by the CIA. And the thing is, that's mainstream history. I mean, that's not something like, yeah, right, uh-huh. But half of the audience was laughing like, where did he pull that up? You know, he might as well have said that his cattle were mutilated by aliens the other day.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
and these were educated people, but they were still, you know, half of them were laughing like he was an idiot, when in reality, what he was talking about was true.
yeah. That's very telling. You know, also during those debates, you know, sometimes he would get enormous applause, and they would cut it out of the TV program, so the people in America weren't aware of how much people were really following Ron Paul at the time.
Oh, they did everything. I remember how they cropped when he would have some event where he had like 20,000 people. They would crop the picture so it looked like he only had maybe a couple hundred in attendance. I mean, it seemed like everyone was out to silence this guy.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing.
Oh,
It's amazing.
tell me, we got about 5 minutes left here.
Okay.
What do you consider your most? We've been talking politics. A lot of people, and remember, it is johnmcnaughton.com. You can go to. What would you consider like your most, I don't know, inspirational or heartfelt painting that you would like? If this had to be on your resume for something, you would include that painting.
Huh, that's an interesting question. You know, I am a religious painter, and it's not that I planned, you know, a career around doing this. I just paint things that are special to me and that speak to my heart. I did a painting a couple of years ago called the Via Dolorosa, and the Via Dolorosa is supposedly the road that Christ carried his cross to Calvary. And I went over there to Israel and I saw this place, and I had this idea for a painting where I had, you know, Christ carrying his cross to the Via Dolorosa, but instead of having it in the historical setting, I decided to put all these people from history around him that have had an impact on Christianity for good or evil. You know, because there's so many different characters. You know,
Yeah, I found it here. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah. And it's a very personal painting. People see it sometimes, they go, "What is that about?" Because right in the middle, you have this guy in a suit, and he's standing there, and he's got one hand on the shoulder of Christ, and another hand he's got up, kind of up in the air, like he's telling people to be quiet. And for me, this painting represents that each one of us has to make a choice how we're going to stand up for what we believe, particularly Christians. You know, Christians have been, you know, and other people too, have been persecuted throughout history. But it's kind of an interesting scenario what's playing out in the world today, as you see a lot of Christians being persecuted and murdered, and even in the United States, you know, Christians are being silenced for what they believe. And so I did this painting as a way to kind of wake up people to think about, you know, where they stand in their beliefs. And on the website, that interactive page, it walks them through it. It goes into detail about who each of these people are. You know, Joan of Arc. It even has like Henry VIII and Stalin and other communist dictators and their abuse of Christians. I mean, it has a lot of history in it. And so that's a painting that's not very well known that I've done. it doesn't get passed around as much because people don't understand its meaning. But it's got a lot of it's thought provoking, I think. So that would be one I would mention.
You even got Idi Amin in there, I think.
Yeah, got a lot of different personalities. Even got Vlad the Impaler.
Oh, did you know Vlad is like there was, I think it was Prince Charles who said that they were directly descended from Vlad. So
I'd probably keep that one under the covers a bit, but
yeah, those royal families are all intermixed with each other, so
yeah, that's true.
They got those kind of the column representation of their bloodlines. But I lost train of thought there. But the one thing I do think is really sad is I looked up an article recently, and it was from the World Jewish Congress, and it was talking about that. It was talking about the plight of Christians in the Middle East right now.
Yeah,
and I thought that was very telling. That I find this really good plea that Christians have to be protected in these countries coming from the World Jewish Congress. But I don't see that much being said by these, mainstream Christianity in the United States. I don't see pastors and ministers up in arms and talking about, hey, we got to do something. It's really ironic.
It's very troubling, the fact that we single out certain people in our government as worthy of our help, and not others. We go over to Syria where you've got, Muslims fighting Muslims, terrorists fighting terrorists, and we're picking a side. And then you've got, Christians, over in Iraq that are total victims to these nutcase ISIS Muslim radicals. And we're not willing to go in there and save them when we could, but we're willing to go into these other countries.
Yeah.
It's insane. It really is.
We were bombing Pakistan, and hitting lots of civilians, but then, the government was saying, well, we don't know if we really should be going in and taking out ISIS in Iraq, and Iraq was asking us to.
Yeah, it's hypocritical.
Yeah. I mean, Pakistan doesn't want us going over and bombing them. But
and the reason that this even happens is because the media will not go after Obama and the administration on these issues. Mm-hmm. They cherry pick. If they were real journalists and really trying to do what they're supposed to, which the media was supposed to do from the very beginning, they would keep the media and they would keep the government in check, and the American public would know about all these things, and we would be up in arms. But they don't talk about any of this.
No, we're too worried about Kim Kardashian's figure and stuff like that in America.
Yeah.
That's why I've become more of a fan of BBC and some of the alternative press rather than the American press, that's for sure. Anyway, well, we've run out of time here, but thank you very, very much, John, for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me, Mike. It was a fun conversation.
Oh, that was one of my most interesting conversations. So anyway, well, and I'd like to thank our listening audience for tuning in, and hope you come back next week for another exciting episode of Unlock the Door Radio right here on UCY TV Productions.
In a Quinnipiac University national poll, a plurality of voters say President Barack Obama is the worst president since World War II. 33% of voters think the current president is the worst since 1945.
For more news, visit pigminenews.com.
This is Oz.